what Professor O'Sullivan is researching is sarcoma. So sarcoma are very rare cancers. So they account for about 1% of all adult cancers and 7% of all pediatric cancers or cancers in children. So Professor O'Sullivan is concentrating on the childhood cancers, and specifically a sarcoma is a cancer of the soft tissues. So it can occur in skin, in organs, in bone. And what she's looking at is sarcoma in kidney in children. And this is the second most common sarcoma in children. And currently the survival rate for sarcomas is around 50%. So 1 in 2 of the people who get a diagnosis of a sarcoma will be alive 5 years after their diagnosis. So this represents quite a poor prognosis cancer. So what Professor O'Sullivan has seen is that there's a change in the DNA of people who have this cancer, so a change in the genetic makeup, and they want to see how this change leads to the development of this sarcoma in children. And by identifying how, or understanding and discovering how this mutation or this change in the DNA of a person can lead to a cancer, that way we can use that information to disrupt that cancer, to identify targets for treatment, to identify biomarkers, to be able to diagnose it earlier. And ultimately, knowing more about how a cancer develops can lead to more treatments, more better, improved diagnosis, prevention even. So it's very important. So this type of research is very important, and it fulfills Breakthrough's priorities, which is to invest in research into poorer prognosis cancers.
I had cancer 20 years ago. I various members of my family as well, but I was working and I was really busy. But I always had it in my mind that at the end of the day, when I retired, it was time for me to give back. I got the most incredible treatment when I was ill, and you know, it's always something that it was part of my life, and I really want to give back. So as soon as I retired in 2019, I got in touch with Breakthrough and said, here I am. So I am more than willing, if I can at all, to do anything that I can to help. And this is a great, because I'm from an education background. I've just retired now, 40 years teaching. So reading reports and reviewing comes very naturally to me. So this is one way that I can help. Yes, so there's a panel of public patient involvement, and we had a lot of work to do to read through quite technical proposals. But we had a very detailed review form. So, you know, we looked at things like, you know, has a good argument been made for this type of research? Has the aim of the research been clearly stated? Have the research methods been clearly outlined? Have the benefits of this research been clearly stated? And what are the learning expectations at the end? And as Frances mentioned there, the Breakthrough Cancer Research Priorities, there are 6 of those. And it's very important that whatever project we take on board, that they meet the criteria there. And one of them, of course, is researching poor prognosis cancers. And this is obviously this one is particularly poignant because it involves children. And then we would, another of the research priorities would be identifying novel therapeutics and biomarkers and integration into cancer care. So, you know, these are the kind of things we looked at: the potential risks, we looked at the dissemination plan, and, you know, how you get the information out at the end. And we looked at one of the questions that they're asked is their own public patient involvement. You know, what are they planning to do? How are they getting information from the public, from the patients? Because the patients have a lot to offer. They have years and years and years of experience. And the one thing we have to say in this particular case is that this is children, and children and older adults basically in our society don't have a voice. And it's vital to shout out for those who can't fight their own corner.
Breakthrough is a national charity, but we're 100% funded by donations and fundraising. So Breakthrough are really happy that we can leverage extra funding. So we're actually doubling the value of any donation that has been made to Breakthrough through partnering in this type of scheme. But equally, HRB are doubling their investment in research. So that is very important as well. So it's
what we want to avoid as researchers is becoming too isolated and siloed, if you like, in our research towers, you know, with thick walls and not communicating with the public. I mean, obviously, when we achieve something on a scientific level, we publish that and it becomes, you know, available to everybody to read. But that's very science driven and very, very complex type language often that goes into those papers. So that's not an adequate forum, in my opinion, to offer lay people to read, to understand more. And I think there is a real need for researchers across the board to actually engage in, on some level, I think you would have to call it education, to share, you know, the intricate and complex work that they're doing on a much, much simpler level for people to be able to grasp what sort of things are going on in a lab. It's not enough to have people assume that they're, you know, somebody in a white coat with a few you know, pipettes or whatever, and some smoke rising in the background, and there's all these crazy experiments going on. I think people are entitled, and obviously with funding coming from a charitable source, and I've had charitable funding in the past as well, and I'm very, very conscious of the fact that, you know, people go out of their way to fundraise. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of organization. And then secondly, that the public, you know, have been very generous in digging deep into their pockets, in trusting what we're doing. And sometimes trusting, I suppose, maybe a little bit blindly, because they're not, historically, they haven't been given a huge amount of feedback as to, you know, what precisely is done with the money. And I think that's something that they're absolutely entitled to know, because, you know, if you spend money on anything, you expect to get something back for it. So the funding is critical because, you know, I'm employed as a full-time consultant here in the Children's Hospital. There's no real scope in my contract for me to take periods of time off and go into the research lab and spend hours and hours a day there, which, you know, that's just not possible. So instead, the funding is used to employ scientists, you know, whom I, you know, vet very rigorously before taking them on as to their suitability and reliability and so on. And then, you know, my job is to guide them through the project. I've thought up the project myself. I've written the grant. I've managed to get the funding, and now my responsibility is to make sure that the funding is used in a very careful and sensible way, that we really get the most out of the funding that we can, that no money is wasted, that the experiments that are done are all logical and necessary, and that the results that we get from those are all leading to the same goal, the same end point of understanding this disease better.